From this class today, we will be studying the development of the cardiovascular system. The usual question globally the students ask, is it necessary to study all this embryology? Well, as you know, a study of embryology is undertaken not just keeping the exam in view. As a future medical doctors, you should be able to recognize and explain why so and so has happened to this newborn baby. The babies which are born with these defects, which are related to the developmental anatomy, are called congenital anomalies. As all of you know that the heart and the lungs, they work hand in hand, and any of the defects which include the heart shall have many ramifications, and many of the systems in the body will be in danger. So we shall keep it in the mind and approach this study of the cardiovascular system. We shall be starting with the development of the heart first, and what goes wrong and what happens if something goes wrong. You must remember that the developing embryo initially is something like a sheet of cells with 3 layers called the ectoderm, which is facing the future back of the embryo, and an endoderm layer which becomes or which faces the future front of the embryo, and the largest germ layer called mesoderm, from which almost all the structures in the body are developed, is sandwiched between these 2 layers, ectoderm and endoderm. This sheet of cells start to bend, which is called the folding of the embryo. The idea is to make a sheet of cells into a cylinder having a cavity. There are 3 cavities in the body, incidentally starting with the alphabet P. So we have a pericardial cavity, a pleural cavity, and peritoneal cavity. Initially, though all of them are a single coelom or single cavity, later on partitions develop and they do get separated from each other. So during the folding, there are 2 tubes, simple tubes called endothelial tubes, or also known as the primitive heart tubes, are formed on right and left side of the body. Concomitant with the folding of the embryo, these 2 tubes come together and fuse in the middle, leaving 2 ends cranially and caudally. So 2 tubes becoming one, but not completely one, only in the middle portion. As we can see here in this slide, the cardiovascular system is the first system to function in the embryo. Say around the 21st day of the gestation, it's always said that the heart starts functioning, the first organ to start functioning and the last to stop at the time of death. and the lungs are the last organs to start functioning after the child takes the first breath and the first to stop. That is rather unfortunate. And around the third week, the cardiovascular system starts to develop. It's not like, as you know, as you might have seen or studied in gross anatomy, where the heart is quite pyramidal in shape, and then you keep it on your left palm to study the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle, and so on. And then there is a big aorta which will ascend out of the pericardium, arches over to the left, over the left root of the lung, and then descends as the descending thoracic aorta first, and then it becomes an abdominal aorta. But during the development, all these structures develop independent of each other, and finally they come together and establish connections to give rise to what's called the cardiovascular system. So anything can go wrong during this reattachment because of the many sources by which they develop, and these sources are called angiogenic clusters. You must remember that we are all made up of cells. We are multicellular organisms, so all the cells which are destined to form the blood vessels. Angios means blood vessels or vessels in particular. It can be used for lymphangiogram or lymphangio, and then for veins also. They all come under angiology. The study is called the angiology. And here, these blood islands are formed in the mesoderm, and all of them take the shape of the developing tubes. And these tubes, since they are modifications of the cells, all these tubes are solid to begin with. Solid means there is no cavity in the tube. As you know, if a tube doesn't have anything in their lumen, then it can function as a tube to transfer or to receive the blood or whatever we are talking about. So this process of a solid tube, a solid rod of cells, and it's something like the inner aspect of this solid tube, which is made up of cells, is drilled, and so that the cavity is formed. So then only we can call it a tube. And if there is a failure of this drilling, which is called recanalization, and if there is a failure, then that particular portion of the tube becomes non-functional. Rather, it cannot function as we expect it to be. So this failure of recanalization is also one of the common congenital anomalies dealing with any tubular structure in the body, not necessarily cardiovascular system. It is, in fact, it is quite often seen in the gastrointestinal tract, where the coils of jejunum and ileum, they can be blocked in some places. So accordingly, there is a partial block, means the drilling process was there but not enough. So it will be called the stenosis. You might have heard about mitral stenosis. The patient is suffering from mitral stenosis or aortic stenosis. It's all because of why it happened and all. This is beyond the scope of this lecture. And if there is a complete failure of recanalization, that particular part or portion of the tube becomes really solid. So any movement of fluids will be impossible, and such a condition is called atresia. So stenosis, a complete failure, is atresia. And around the beginning of the second month of pregnancy, that is the 4th week, the heart really starts functioning. As I said, that around 21st day when the first somites are formed, I hope you know what is somite. Well, otherwise no problem. This is what we have discussed just now. So, the mesoderm is divided into two types. The one is destined to form the viscera is called splanchnopleuric viscera. Splanchnos means viscera, and the other one which forms a part of the body wall is somatopleuric mesoderm, and there is a cardiogenic area at the cranialmost part of the embryo. That's where the heart is formed. It's somewhat close to the mouth, you know. If you remember a buccopharyngeal membrane and cranial to that, still the cranialmost structure, let us say, is the heart. And no wonder in English we say when there is a sudden fright, suddenly you are walking in a dark alley and somebody says boo, and then there is an expression, the shock is expressed in English as my heart jumped into my mouth. Indeed, we are referring to the embryological structure there. So as I told you, the two tubes are formed which are called the primitive heart tubes. And another point you must remember, during the development of the heart tubes or cardiovascular system, everything is paired. We have two sides, right and left. These are called the sides. You should not say medial side, lateral side. They are directions. Either it should be medial or lateral, but as far as the sides are concerned, we say right hand drive or left hand drive, as the case may be. So the two tubes, right and left primitive heart tubes, are formed, and now the folding of the embryo begins with resulting in the fusion of the two heart tubes which fuse in the middle, and that we will see. Here is a diagrammatic representation of the developing cardiovascular system. As you can see that there is a heart primordium which is the cranialmost structure, and that is where the heart is going to be formed. And if we take a section, we will see how it looks in the subsequent slides. And what we have to appreciate is that the formation of the various blood islands, angiogenic clusters, which will aggregate themselves, which will gather themselves to form the various tubes which make up the cardiovascular system. Here also please remember the site of oropharyngeal membrane, or let us say the future mouth. So cranial to the future mouth will be the developing heart. The opposite portion is the aboral end, or the future anal canal. It is called, for some time it's called cloaca. Before that, later on it will divide. In this slide we can see a transverse section. In the lower portion, here the two heart tubes which are formed separately on the right and left sides of the embryo, now they have come closer and they are starting to fuse. So this is what's called the fusion of the primitive heart tubes. These are simple heart tubes, as I told you. Simple means they are lined by endothelium. As you know, there are special names given to simple squamous epithelium in the body, and in the cardiovascular system we call it endothelium. like in the lungs and all, you call it mesothelium. It's all same, it's all mesoderm. Now the fused portion of the heart tubes, which is in the midline, and it will show number of dilatations which are in communication with each other, that you must remember. And these are named from the head to the toe, which is called craniocaudally. These are called the truncus arteriosus. As we are here, let us say this is a common tube which later divides into aorta and the pulmonary trunk. That is the point to understand, that two different arteries, two great arteries having different functions. One is dealing with the deoxygenated blood and the other one is carrying the oxygenated blood to all parts of the body, that is aorta. So but both have come from a single and simple and the same tube, and the division of this one tube into two plays an important role in explaining congenital anomalies. The next portion, caudal to truncus arteriosus, is the beginning of these arteries called bulbus cordis. As you are here, I hope you remember the gross anatomy. The beginning of the pulmonary trunk in the right ventricle is called, it's rather smooth, and it is called the infundibulum. And its counterpart on the aorta, in the ascending aorta's beginning from the left ventricle, is called the vestibule. So the beginnings of the great arteries, which is going to become the truncus arteriosus, or rather later on divides into pulmonary trunk and the aorta. They have the beginnings, and the combined beginnings once again is called the bulbus cordis. So far we are dealing with a single tube. We have not yet partitioned them into right and left. That is the point to remember. The next chamber, caudal to bulbus cordis, since they are coming from the ventricles, so the next chamber is called a primitive ventricle. So primitive ventricle, once again a single tube, then it is succeeded by a single tube called, or single chamber if you may prefer, primitive atrium, and finally the caudal mousse structure in the developing heart tube is called sinus venosus. So please remember these names. Truncus arteriosus, let us say, you can write that future aorta and pulmonary trunk, they are derived from truncus arteriosus. Bulbus cordis, I am just making it simple for you. Bulbus cordis, let us say that it gives rise to the beginnings of the great arteries, which are called infundibulum on the right side and vestibule on the left side. Primitive ventricle is still a single chamber which later will be dividing into two, right and left, but this division will not be complete till the baby is born. So there is always a communication between the right half and left half of the ventricles. The same thing goes to the primitive atrium. It has a wonderful history that we will see soon, and the cranial most part, or the portion of the heart tube, is called sinus venosus. Well, this is a diagrammatic representation of the heart tube and the changes taking place within them, within the fused primitive heart in the middle. And this is the cranial end and this is the caudal end, and the cranial end that is beyond the truncus arteriosus. That end is called arterial end. Naturally, truncus arteriosus is becoming two arteries, the great arteries, the pulmonary trunk and the aorta. So that end of the heart is called arterial end, and its opposite, the caudalmost portion, which belongs to sinus venosus, is called the venous end of the heart. At this juncture, you must remember that the sinus venosus, this chamber, along with the atrium, ventricle, bulbus and truncus arteriosus, they are all in continuum. They are in communication with other tubes. So blood starts to flow from right to left independently, as I told you, from the angiogenetic clusters or blood islands, which aggregate themselves into three primitive veins on each side. We have three sources from which the venous blood in the embryo shall reach the developing heart. Let us say sinus venosus. Excuse me. One is coming from the body wall, and that vein is called common cardinal vein. And the other source from which the venous blood would be arriving is placenta. This is an important vein. Ultimately, there is only one vein will be left behind, but in the beginning there are two umbilical veins. The other source is from yolk sac. So the yolk sac also gives a pair of veins, right and left vitelline veins. So reaching the sinus venosus, where the two arrows are showing, the caudally, it's not correct to say below and above, as you see in the diagram. We must always say that the arterial end is towards the developing head, so it is cranial, and the opposite is caudal. So these are the primitive veins. The description you will find in the next slide. Now let's come back to, we'll start our story with the sinus venosus. Often asked question for you, so you please get ready. What is sinus venosus? Or simply they will say describe in brief or something like that. I don't know the system now. Nonetheless, it's a universally asked topic. Sinus venosus. So your answer shall be, it has a body and two horns, right and left, which are receiving the paired primitive veins, and the left horn slowly becomes smaller in size, and in the adult heart it is represented by coronary sinus. You know coronary sinus, that is the large vein of the heart itself, which is draining the cardiac veins before it opens into the right atrium. So, question, how the coronary sinus of the heart develops? Your answer shall be, the left horn of the sinus venosus, after regression, it shall become coronary sinus in adults. Very well, this is what I was talking to you about the primitive veins and the sources from which these veins are derived from the right and left sides. Umbilical veins from the placenta, vitelline veins right and left coming from the yolk sac, and common cardinal veins coming from the body wall. Since we are here, just remember, you have studied portal vein, I suppose. So anyone asks you, how is it developed? Portal vein develops from then your answer shall be, at least you say, the vitelline veins will give rise to portal vein. The further details we can see later, but at this juncture, just remember. And similarly, the common cardinal veins with some modifications and all will be giving rise to the great veins, the vena cava and others. Let's recall the gross anatomy of the heart. If you remember, the ventricles will jut forwards and they are a bit anterior to the corresponding atria. And the atria, more or less, they are on the back of the heart. Especially you can see that the left atrium is on the posterior aspect of the heart. Why? And much of the right atrium as well is on the back of the heart. Obviously, this particular shape, what we see in the adults, has resulted in the various foldings which will take place in the otherwise appearing as a straight heart tube. So far we have seen that the fused heart tube and its dilatations, but next change will be the bending of the heart or the folding of the heart tube in such a way that the venous end goes to the back and the arterial end will be projecting forwards. So arterial end means the ventricles and the great arteries which are coming from them, and the venous end is represented by the atria. Whether it's oxygenated or deoxygenated blood, it doesn't matter now. And the atria will be receiving the venous blood wherever it is coming from. So they shall be on the back of the heart, and that is how we will be identifying the atrial and the venous end. And this happened because of the folding of the heart tube, right? And during this, the heart actually is suspended. This particular tube is suspended within the cavity. As I told you, there is a pericardial cavity by a fold of mesoderm that is called the dorsal mesocardium. So this dorsal mesocardium later on will start to disintegrate, so that there is a gap between the arterial end and the venous end, which you might have studied, or if you remember the transverse sinus, where you can pass your index finger, right index finger rather, behind the roots of the great arteries. And so in front of the finger will be the arteries and behind will be the atria, and that transverse sinus is due to the disappearance of dorsal mesocardium. So this is also, this can be asked as a, I don't know, you have fill in the blanks or 1 mark question, something like that. Usually asked question for you even in Viva. How is transverse sinus is formed? So you will write that it is formed by the disappearance of dorsal mesocardium, which was suspending the heart tube in the pericardial cavity. Here, before we go into the details, let's recall or recapitulate the gross anatomy of the heart. You might have opened the right atrium, where you have studied the crista terminalis, which is rough, and posterior part of the right atrium is smooth and it's called sinus venerum. Similarly, in the right ventricle there is a rough part and a smooth part. Left ventricle also, even in the left atrium. So it means that all the 4 chambers of the heart have a rough part and a smooth part. The rough parts, whether it is crista terminalis or papillary muscles, cauda tendinae, these are all derived from the original heart tube chambers. Like we have said, primitive ventricle, primitive atrium, these are represented by the rough parts of the heart tube, whether it's atrium or ventricle. The smooth portions of these chambers, which we have studied as sinus venerum in right atrium, or lunate fossa in the left atrium, infundibulum, that is the beginning of the pulmonary trunk in the right ventricle, vestibule on the left ventricle, all these smooth portions indicate that some other structure has come and fused or absorbed into the existing chambers. So basically all the chambers of the heart in the adults will have a rough portion and a smooth portion. The rough portions represent the original heart tube chambers, and the smooth portions indicate that some structure is absorbed. In these 3 or 4 slides, we will see the diagrammatic representations of the bending of the heart, how the venous end or the future atria will go to the back, and then the arterial end, which is represented by the ventricles, will be jutting forwards. And don't say the heart is on the left side. It's wrong, quite wrong indeed. It may not be strictly in the midline. If it is on the left side, then there is the concept of right atrium, right ventricle is gone. It rotates in its long axis so that it is something like I turn my face to the left side, so you will see my right side of the face at the expanse of the left. Only small portion of the left half of this face is visible, but it's dominated by the right side of the face. Same thing happens in the heart as well. It will rotate in such a way in its long axis that seen from the front, you will see most of the right heart. We always say right heart failure and left heart failure. So we should not say that there is only one heart. Functionally speaking, there are two. And another point is, it may not be strictly in the midline. It might have slightly shifted to the left. It doesn't mean that it is not, it's completely on the left side of the median plane. This is a small animation to show the fused primitive heart tubes with the cranial and caudal ends, and its bending to take the venous end of the heart, that is the atria, to the back of the heart, and the arterial end to the forwards. Now we can ask a question, how about the heart turns to the right instead of left? Something like that. So the left half of the face, as I gave you the example, so such a condition where the heart is turned in the opposite direction is called dextrocardia. Dextro means right, levo means left. Very few places in the anatomy these two terms, two adjectives are used, and here is one. It is called dextrocardia. It is also a congenital anomaly. It's a rotation problem, malrotation rather, and there is nothing wrong with these people. This is a coronal section to show the two halves of the primitive atrium and the various septa which are formed there. This is the septum primum, which has fused with the AV cushions, and there is a formation of septum secundum as well, and the communication is called foramen ovale. which will become fossa ovalis, and the edge is called limbus fossa ovalis. In the following slides, you can see that the various steps in the formation of the interatrial septum. By the way, please remember, it's also one of the favorite questions of the anatomists. They will ask you, describe the development of the interatrial septum, or how the primitive atrium is divided into two. So you will start your story with the formation of the septum primum. Why there should be a communication between the right half and left half? Because of the non-functioning lungs and the fused AV cushions, how the ostium primum and ostium secundum differ in their level, which is found in the developing atrium, and the septum secundum, foramen ovale, and what will happen postnatally once the child starts lung breathing. As we have studied the development of the interatrial septum, as we are here, now let us say, what if something goes wrong? The septum primum may not reach the endocardial cushions, or when it detaches itself from the roof of the common atrium, the ostium secundum may be large. So any defects in the atrial septum are, if not common, but there are also possibilities. And this birth defect of the heart, congenital cardiac anomaly, is called ASD in clinical parlance, atrial septal defect. So it can involve septum primum or ostium primum. So when we call ostium primum defect or ostium secundum defect, or some babies are born with a pinpoint foramen ovale which refuses to close, and it may not give rise to any symptoms. It is rather asymptomatic. So this is the so-called hole in the heart, perhaps. So when there is a large gap in the interatrial septum, that means we are going back into the original position of the developing heart. So there is a free communication between the right and left hearts, and even after the child is born, this gap shall persist, and that's called atrial septal defect. While these changes are taking place in the common atrium, which is showing signs of partitioning into two, the ventricle also will follow suit, and there is a common ventricle to begin with, as we have seen. Now a thick muscular growth starts from the floor of the common ventricle. The destination seems to be the AV cushions. Even septum primum has come down to fuse it, and this septum in the ventricle, which is called the interventricular septum, it starts to grow towards the AV cushions. by then it is end of the first month of pregnancy, and this also follows the same principles, that there should be a communication between the right half of the ventricle and left half of the ventricle, for the same reasons that lungs are not functioning. So this communication is called interventricular foramen, and which finally it will be obliterated at the time of the childbirth. It has two parts, this interventricular septum. You might have studied in your gross anatomy. One is quite bulky, which is called the muscular part of the interventricular septum. Close to the AV cushions, it is somewhat difficult to imagine the development of it, but let us keep it as a very thin portion called membranous part of the interventricular septum. So, interventricular septum is also another question that is usually asked, because bundle of fish is flanking the sides, and what is the arterial supply? Anteriorly by lead artery and posteriorly by the posterior interventricular, and so many things you can write about them. And so the membranous part and the muscular part will form the complete interventricular septum, but all the same the communication between the right and left halves will be maintained, and after the child is born, then they will fuse to separate the right ventricle from the left ventricle. This is a diagrammatic representation where he is showing, if you concentrate on the ventricle, from the floor of it, a thick septum is growing towards the AV cushions, and it stops short and it is replaced by a very thin part called membranous part of the interventricular septum. Most of the congenital cardiac anomalies, including the ventricle, they are almost confined to the membranous part because of the complexity in its development. This is frequently asked question for you. Well, it may be in MCQ or straight away as a short note. You will have to write these four cardinal features. Often students get confused. You must remember that VSD, ventricular septal defect, is the most common congenital anomaly of the heart. Almost all the congenital anomalies, with the exception of the ASDs, they will be showing a ventricular septal defect. That also indicates the very complex development of the membranous part of the interventricular septum. So we will start with the four cardinal features of phallus tetralogy. Number one is VSD, ventricular septal defect. Here they may try to confuse you, that they may give you ASD, so you will fall for it. The next one, because of the VSD, we will take cue from VSD and see what's happening. There is a gap in the ventricle, a big one, and two big arteries are arising from them. One is aorta, other is pulmonary trunk on the right half. So because of this gap, the aorta will be encroaching onto the right side, thereby compressing the pulmonary trunk. So this phenomenon, where the aorta is transgressing its limits, trespassing rather, is called overriding of aorta, and this is possible only if there is a gap in the interventricular septum. So subsequent to the overriding of aorta, because of the pressure exerted by the aorta, the pulmonary trunk becomes narrow, So we call it pulmonary stenosis. And with the pulmonary stenosis, the right ventricle has to do a lot of work, extra work, which will result in right ventricular hypertrophy. So these four are called the cardinal features of phallus tetralogy. Everything is related to ventricular septal defect. So VSD, which results in overriding of the aorta, which indeed causes pulmonary stenosis, and that shall result in the right ventricular hypertrophy. In the succeeding slides, you will see a diagrammatic representation of phallus tetralogy. In this diagram, we can see the right ventricle is hypertrophied because of the additional work. It has to overcome the narrow portion, that is the pulmonary stenosis, and the aorta is overriding onto the pulmonary trunk, and definitely there is an interventricular septal defect, or VSD, ventricular septal defect. The fate of truncus arteriosus, I have already mentioned that in the heart tube, the cranial most dilatation or portion of the heart tube is the truncus arteriosus. It is a common tube which later divides into aorta, ascending aorta, and pulmonary trunk, and this also happens by the formation of a spiral septum in such a way that the aorta will always be attached to the left half of the ventricle and the pulmonary trunk to the right half of the ventricle. So that, and you can see the spiraling which is quite evident when you study the gross anatomy. Remember the arch of aorta. The ascending aorta comes from the left ventricle, ascends to the right, and the arch of aorta from the right to left. Now let's come to the pulmonary trunk. Coming from the right ventricle, ascends to the left, and then it divides. So they do spiral around each other, and this is because of a septum that's called spiral septum. So the next question we will ask is, what happens if something is wrong with the spiral septum? Well, aorta will come from the right ventricle and pulmonary trunk will come from the left ventricle, and you know the problems. The spiral septum is also called aorticopulmonary septum. Perhaps this is a better name, because it indicates that this particular septum is separating the aorta and the pulmonary trunk in a spiral fashion, so that the aorta will come from the left and the pulmonary trunk will come from the right ventricle. Coming to the congenital anomalies involving the spiral septum or truncus arteriosus, when there is an incomplete division between or within the truncus arteriosus, so the great arteries which are coming from that is aorta and pulmonary trunk, may be fused into a common trunk, and so that is incomplete division. And in the slide it says that note VSD. That's why we said that VSD is the most common congenital cardiac anomaly. So the beginning may be fused, that is aorta and pulmonary trunk, they come together as a single vessel which later may get separated. So there is a contamination between the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, and this is called PTA, or persistent truncus arteriosus. Understandably, it is the embryological structure stage where it is a common tube which should have separated into two great arteries, but it didn't due to some problem, but there is always a VSD. So any faulty spiral septum shall result in the transposition of the great arteries, which is described as TGA, that is aorta coming from right ventricle and the pulmonary trunk from the left. I have given here a series of animations, so you see them in normal view. Double click in the center, and these are quite fast as well. There are small clips, but you can always pause them and to appreciate what we have studied so far in a summary. And I am also giving another animation which is a larger file, so that you can have a better idea of what we have learned today.